On the buzz meter this Sunday, President Trump causing a huge uproar by ripping Mika Brzezinski on Twitter, moments after she and Joe Scarborough attacked him in personal terms once again.
Nothing makes a man feel better than making a fake cover of a magazine about himself, lying every day and destroying the country.
That prompted the president's tweet saying he had seen Mika bleeding badly from a facelift.
The president's tweets, whether they're personally aimed at me or aimed at me in some way, that doesn't bother me one bit. It does worry me about the country. He appears to have a fragile, impetuous, childlike ego that we've seen over and over again, especially with women.
He, for some reason, takes things so much more personally with women. He's so much more vicious with women.
Did the president cross a line? Does he get too personal with female journalists? And are the media ignoring the harsh criticism of Trump by MSNBC's morning duo?
I think that the president is pushing back against people who attack him day after day after day. Where is the outrage on that?
President declaring victory over so-called fake news outlets after CNN retracts a story on the Russia investigation and 3 of its journalists forced to resign.
President Trump is crowing tonight about the resignations of 3 CNN employees. He says it's more proof of fake news in the media.
It seems that CNN was chasing ratings at the expense of human collateral damage and individuals they smeared like Anthony Scaramucci, and also a bloodlust to go after the American president and delegitimize him.
It's like an example of how to do it.
It's how to do it.
If you make a mistake, Journalism 101 says you admit your mistake, you correct it immediately, and you take corrective action.
Yeah. How did that story get published, and was CNN's apology enough? We'll talk to the Trump advisor who was targeted by that story and calls it a lie, Anthony Scaramucci. Some journalists crying foul as the president and his team used the CNN mistake to ratchet up their criticism of the entire press corps.
We can't take the bullying anymore. It's undermining the Fourth Estate. It's undermining the First Amendment.
But is it bullying when the administration pounces on media mistakes? Plus, Sarah Palin suing the New York Times over an inflammatory editorial linking her to a 6-year-old shooting. Does she have a case? I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Mika Brzezinski and her fiancé Joe Scarborough have been bashing the president for many months on Morning Joe.
I had hope and an open mind, and I have lost hope completely, and my mind is closed. This presidency is fake and failed. I think he's such a narcissist. It is possible that he's mentally ill in a way, and this is on the table. I said it months ago, and now everybody's starting to say it like it's new and it's okay to say.
Yeah.
He's not well.
My mother's had dementia for 10 years. That sounds like the sort of thing my mother would say today.
President Trump, as you know, firing back on Twitter, put it up on the screen. I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me, don't watch anymore. And how come low IQ crazy Mika, along with Psycho Joe, came to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve, insisted on joining me. She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no. The condemnation across the media and political spectrum, including some Republicans, was almost unanimous.
As soon as I saw the word bleeding, I flinched, and he just took it too far. There are ways to get your message across where you do not stoop to that level, and that was not necessary.
It degrades the political discourse, and it embarrasses the country.
It's something that's meant to go at, to demean the woman, specifically to her womanhood, right? It's a misogynist attack.
To his mind, that is the worst insult you can make about a person, and especially a woman, is having to do with her looks and having to do with something about blood.
That was a rude tweet, but some of the crap that they've been saying in the morning, I don't know.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders defending her boss.
This is a president who fights fire with fire and certainly will not be allowed to be bullied by liberal media and the liberal elites within the media or Hollywood or anywhere else.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Sharyl Attkisson, host of the Sunday show Full Measure on Sinclair Television and author of the new book, The Smear, How Shady Political Operatives and Fake News Control What You See, What You Think, and How You Vote. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist and a Fox News contributor. And Ray Suarez, a former correspondent for the PBS NewsHour. This is a Fox Buzz alert. This just happened. President Trump Still, on this July 4th weekend, taking after the media on Twitter. Here's a video that he put up moments ago. Let's go around the table. Over the top, funny, too violent. Cheryl.
I don't care a whole lot about it, but I would say that the president knows by now the kind of response his tweets get and has obviously decided it works in his favor, whether it does or not. That's clearly what he thinks.
Molly.
Yeah, I personally believe that you should turn the other cheek when you're attacked. That is not what this president believes, and he is definitely picked out CNN and Joe and Mika as the targets that he's going to punch back at, and certainly those groups in particular have been quite harsh against him.
Will there be video of him wrestling Mika next? Ray.
It's peculiar, and that's part of what's attracting our attention, the peculiarity of all of this. We're pattern searchers.
Yes.
News people look for patterns,
right,
and they look for things that deviate from the norm. Well, this deviates from the norm.
Well, that's why I saw this an hour ago and said, let's put it at the top of the show. All right, let's get on to this facelift tweet. By the way, Mika Brzezinski saying she didn't have any facelift. She had a little skin tightened on her neck. It's unanimous. The media say this crossed the line. President should have done it. It's really bad. At the same time, she and Scarborough have been relentlessly attacking her. Your thoughts? Attacking him, excuse me.
I think in general that this is sort of coming to a head. The battles that we've seen started over the last 2 years or so with the media attacking Trump counterattacking or attacking back as hard or harder than he gets it. And I think this is sort of the result. And once again, his followers are not deterred, at least in my experience, the people I've been speaking to over the course of time, by his behavior when he does this.
Do most of the media in covering this ignore, minimize, downplay some of the language that we saw that Joe and Mika use against him? Mentally ill, thug, a goon, I mean, very harsh personal stuff on their side.
Right, and without change, he's the president. He should be held to a different standard than the media. But I don't see any reason why we shouldn't acknowledge that the media have been so hostile and so personal in their attacks. There's clearly something very personal going on in some people's opposition to this president. And also, though, the issue of whether he's being particularly misogynistic or something, that just boggles the mind. It's like you haven't followed Donald Trump for years. He is like the Don Rickles of politics. If you're in his orbit, his shtick will be that he insults you if you're opposed to him. That happens to men, that happens to women, and the idea that it only happens to women is just, it's like, you can't make that claim when we all watched the primary, we all watched the general. We know exactly how he operates.
Right. No, I've got a long list of insults that he's hurled against men, but there's something about going after women's looks that obviously gets a lot of people upset. By the way, Ray, he had a tweet yesterday that was sort of a little bit cooler, saying that Joe and Mika are not bad people. Mika, by the way, dumb as a rock, says the President of the United States.
Well, he wants to get it off her looks, apparently, and go on to what he feels is more solid territory.
Right.
This is just odd. The President of the United States himself coming down from Olympus to sort of put himself on the same level as morning cable commentators.
You see it as punching down. But you say, it's not sexist. He does this to both sexes, both genders, I should say. But does it remind people of the president's slam against Megyn Kelly, blood coming out of her wherever, and then, what he said about women on the Access Hollywood tape? In other words, is it self-destructive on that level?
I don't know. I mean, I think that people understand that he is an insulter. He goes after people, whether they are male or female. And you take someone like Joe Scarborough, I think that there is something very personal there, too. You have to remember, during the primary, wasn't Joe Scarborough floating his own name as a VP candidate?
He was floating his own name, but
he was very favorable. They were very favorable to the president. They were very
While you're talking, let's put up some footage of them all interviewing the president at the beginning of 2016. Go ahead and make your point.
Right, and he was, I mean, they really did a lot to normalize or legitimize his candidacy during the primary.
Well, they said they thought he might win at a time when many did not believe that.
Yeah, they had him on all the time, and they were very friendly toward him. And now, so this kind of erratic nature thing, it's not just the president, it's also these media outlets.
The day that the tweet storm began and everybody started talking about Joe and Mika, great publicity for them, by the way, $1 billion worth of free publicity, was the day the travel ban partially took effect due to a Supreme Court ruling. That would have been the lead story. And so I've had many White House officials say to me, with some justification, that the media are often chasing these side issues and scandals or pseudo-scandals, they see it, and not covering the substance of his agenda. But isn't this a case where the president is detracting from his own agenda?
I think he's helping, but, Molly said something about him being held to a higher standard. There's truth to that. But I look at it a little differently. I expect politicians, I don't expect a lot from them. And I think regardless of what they do, even if it's the president, we in the media should be held to a professional standard, regardless of what our observations lead us to think personally. And I think that's where we're really falling short a lot.
Ray, as much as the media mavens are outraged by this, and it's consumed all of this airtime and ink and online.
Which it shouldn't have, by the way. But
okay, well, you can tell me why. But although even when you have Paul Ryan sort of criticizing, you cover that. But Trump supporters love this when he beats up on pundits, and they don't mind that he uses street language.
The term "the media" has come to mean so many people doing so many different things in so many places that we no longer seem to have the discretion to see the difference between somebody who writes straight-ahead journalism versus somebody who just says what they feel on any given morning or whacks somebody that they don't like particularly. They're doing different jobs and in different contexts all the time.
Well, one of the problems, though, is that those used to be very distinct jobs, and now it seems they're bleeding into each other.
We've allowed ourselves to
and also you see reporters on Twitter revealing everything about what their personal political biases are, and they're not doing as good of a job of keeping those out of their actual copy as well. And so many of these things that I don't think people realize is the media attacks on Trump or the media attacks on Republicans in general are taken very personally by that half of the country that is not represented in most newsrooms. So they attack these people, but a lot of people think of it as a personal attack on them.
Come back to the point about how personal it has gotten. So, for example, during the campaign, before the romantic relationship between Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, before they went public and they're engaged to be married, Trump tweeted, and this caused a big stir, very insecure. He called Mika Joe's very insecure longtime girlfriend two clowns. He also called her neurotic. And all this is just catnip for the media, so he knows how to work us.
That, and also, I think there's something interesting about the NBC connection, too, in that this is a former employer of Donald Trump.
Yes, The Apprentice.
And you also see this in the CNN connection in that Jeff Zucker is a former NBC person, too. I don't know if there's some personal backstory. Or maybe the president feels personally betrayed somehow.
Right.
And that's what's leading to personal...
Now, there's a new twist, show with Scarborough going on there the next day and saying that White House aides told him that the National Enquirer was going to do a piece on him and Mika, a negative piece, and that it could be killed if he apologized. The Enquirer, by the way, run by a close pal of President Trump, and that set off some people saying, wow, this is pressure, this is blackmail.
I don't know that in the environment that we're discussing that qualifies as blackmail. It is pressure, and all kinds of pressure being exerted on news organizations and opinion people to say and do certain things, which is one of the things I write about. But the idea that pressure to create a narrative or to steer away from a narrative is very heavy on many fronts. The president seems able to uniquely cut through that, whether for good or for bad in the minds of his critics and supporters, with his social media and his comments.
Well, my White House sources say that it was Joe Scarborough that called Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and White House official, and told him about this Enquirer piece that was sort of looming. It was ultimately published under a headline about big cheating scandal at Morning Joe. Jared said, well, talk to the president. Joe said, well, he's mad at me. And Jared said, well, maybe you should apologize. That's not exactly the same as a threat.
Well, Joe Scarborough says he has a series of back-and-forth communications that he hasn't shown yet.
That's right. He has these texts.
They may back up his version of events, or they may back up Jared Kushner's. I guess we have to wait to see. But I can't even believe we're talking about this.
Right. But clearly we need a special prosecutor for this. We must find out this. By the way, the editor of the National Enquirer, Dylan Howard, told me that there was no harassment of Mika's kids, as she had claimed, her teenage kids. And the story was routinely published, and he doesn't know what conversations may have gone on between Scarborough and the White House. All right, we'll move on to other forms of journalism in a moment. Ahead, Trump advisor Anthony Scaramucci on being falsely accused by CNN. But when we come back, we'll break down that retracted story that cost 3 CNN journalists their jobs.